My name is Francisco Mendoza. My pronouns are he, him. I am a writer as well as the marketing manager at the Playwrights Room. A visual description, I am a white man with wearing a blue t-shirt and glasses, which I just took off. And I am coming in from Brooklyn, the ancestral land of the Canarsie and the Napi people. And I'm gonna pass it on to Kholoud.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Kholoud. Sawaf. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and my visual description, I am a woman from Syria, so I have olive skin, green olives, please. And I am a Muslim woman, so I'm who wears the hijab. I have a dark gray hijab, and I'm sitting with a green top and green and white, and I'm sitting on a blue couch. And I am a theater director and a deviser. I'm speaking to you from Fayetteville, Arkansas, the land of the Osage, the Kwa, and the Caddo people, which also I want to take a very brief second to acknowledge the Palestinian struggle defending their land and facing genocide and ethnic cleansing. And I will pass that to Salma.
Thank you, Kholoud, for that, and thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Salma Zohdi, Salma Zohdi, she, her, hers. I'm a dramaturg. I am from Egypt, and hence also the olive skin. I am a visual description. I have curly hair. I'm wearing a navy blue top. I have a gray background behind me. What else? Yeah, and I'm tuning in from the land of the Lenape people, and I'm often associated with institutions like Rattlestick Playwrights Theater, North Theater Company, and Flux Theater Company, but at different capacities, not as a dramaturg always. But that's, yep. I would like to pass it on to Jessica.
Thank you, Salma. My name is Jessica Wu. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a writer, director, an educator, and a convention delegate for Actors Equity. I am zooming in from East Harlem, New York, which is the unceded lands of the Munsee and Lenape. And visual description, I am female presenting, I'm of Asian descent, so I am also part of the Olive Skin Club. I've got long black hair, and I'm wearing a black sweatshirt that says the words unapologetically Asian on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, everyone. I was going to say also, first of all, I'm from Argentina. I absolutely skipped over that part in the panel about immigrants. But also, I was going to say, since the interactive portion where you can ask questions will be towards the end, feel free to turn off your camera. And then, you can turn it back on later when you have a question. Okay, so let's go around again. And maybe this time we talk a little bit about our history with immigration, how we ended up in the United States, if comfortable, under which visas. I do, I transitioned between a couple, so I do want to talk about that as well. So as I said, I am Argentinian. I was born and raised in Argentina. When I was 12, I migrated for the first time. My family moved to Brazil, and we lived there. I lived there till I was 25. I had already graduated college and was pursuing a career in marketing. And then I was like, no, I really want to be a writer. And so I moved to the United States at 25 to New York City. I came here first on a tourist visa. And then when I moved here permanently, I came in a student visa to an MFA program in New York City at NYU. After my MFA program, I used what is called the optical practical training part of my student visa, which is a length of about a year that you get either during your program or after it to work, which is considered still part of your education, which is why it's part of the visa as well. And at that time, I looked for jobs, the so-called day job that can support your art. In the marketing section of theater, the thing about the OPT is you can't just do any kind of work. You have to do work that relates to your field of study. So it wasn't like I could do marketing for anyone. It had to be within the entertainment industry. And at that time, I found it was, I would just throw this in there to sort of like, this will be featured in the discussion. It was hard to find work. People were not comfortable with hiring someone who, after a year, could possibly not stay in the country. But I was lucky enough to find the player Trum. The producing director there, Roberta Pereira, is an immigrant herself. Coincidentally from Brazil, so she like actually knew the places that I had worked at before moving here, and she had no trouble hiring me. The Realm was at the time expanding its marketing department, and she was very happy with the experience that I had had previously, so she hired me. And then when my OPT expired, I applied for what is called an Extraordinary Abilities Visa, the O1, specifically the O1B, which is Extraordinary Abilities in the Arts. And I also want to talk about like that word extraordinary. So I was granted that visa, which is about to expire now, and I'm very happy to announce that it has been renewed. Last Tuesday, I heard back that I am gonna get to stay longer. That's the visa that I'm currently under. Similarly to the OPT, it doesn't allow me to work in whatever I want. It's for my field, but I've been lucky enough to amass credits and offers that allow me to stay here for now. I'm gonna popcorn it over to Salma.
Thank you for this, Francisco, and you did pave the way to like a lot of the points that I would also like to talk about. Well, my journey here has been long and still ongoing. It's been 8 years now. I first arrived here on an F1 visa to study at Columbia. Success. It wasn't an easy process as well. I've had visa issues, but that's nothing that has to do with the immigration policy here, more than the unrest that was happening in Egypt around that time, and having the name of an institution on my visa different from Colombia, and then me having to change. I had a lot of visits to the US consulate. I know the process by heart now. So this is my F1 for 3 years. Then I had the year of OPT where I worked at an institution, a theater institution. And throughout my year there was an assumption that I was going to renew my visa. So there was a lot of, basically, my visa did not get renewed. I think there was a lot of miscommunication from both of our parts on what needs to be done and required for me to stay in the country. And we'll get to talk about that like deeper later. But then I was offered, basically my visa was not going to get sponsored. So, and I had a very short amount of time to like figure things out. To my luck, another institution that works for a university actually offered me a J1 to buy time so I can build my portfolio, which it was really beneficial in that way. That opportunity was like there was some exploitation happening there, but also we'll get to this like later on the things we say yes to, thinking sometimes that people have our backs, but then at the end you realize, oh no, I'm being taken advantage of. And when to stand up for yourself and how safe it is, or if it's not safe. Till this day, I haven't really, this is the first time I think I talk about this institution particularly and that experience. But it bought me time to build my O1, which I'm so grateful for. And then I submitted my first visa application for the O1, a completely heinous experience and full-time. And I'm going through it right now again, because I'm in the process of renewing my visa. Yeah, and to be honest, I feel like my journey as an immigrant artist was not highlighted, nor was it. I mean, I have a lot of amazing people that support me. Many of them are in this room actually today as well. So I'm so happy to have a lot here. And many of them people that had worked at TCG that I would like to shout out to later. But basically, I felt that the year of COVID sort of highlighted a little bit the need for like, the stakes became so high. So a lot of institutions that weren't paying attention to immigrant artists started to, because I feel we were all on the same leveling field of anxiety, and now everyone's like, oh, we understand what you're going through, okay, let us help you out. So as hard as my journey has been, and it still is I'm sure each of us have their own experiences and hurdles and challenges. I'm grateful for last year career-wise, because my voice was finally heard, and my anxieties were heard, and the challenges that I have to go through, and the emotional labor that us immigrant artists have to go through, just even through the process of applying for a job, and the conversations that we have are very different. So I'm grateful for this year for highlighting the need for people to support us. But yeah, so this is basically a quick summary. I hope it was quick. I would like to pass it on to Jessica.
Thank you, Salma. My name's Jessica, like I said before. I'm originally from Canada, but my parents were Hong Kong Chinese immigrants to Canada, and I spent my entire childhood growing up in Canada. And when I was 17, I came to New York on an F1 visa to go to. I went to NYU for a 4-year musical theater program because I wanted to be on Broadway, like so many of folks from other countries come here to do. And I was on that F1 for 4 years. That was in 2000. I graduated in 2004. And for my OPT, which Francisco had mentioned, is the 1 year after your F1. It's an extension of your F1, essentially. I booked an Equity National Tour, and I went on the national tour of The King and I in 2004, 2005, where I gathered, materials for my portfolio, and that allowed me to apply for my O1 visa, my O1B. Francisco also mentioned it as the extraordinary artist visa, which we have so many thoughts about that word, but we'll get into that later. And I, in kind of the years following, because that was 2005 when I first got my O1B, I imagine that many producers and theaters and folks who work in the theater on this, in the producing side on this call may have encountered some issues from the Actors Equity Union regarding non-resident aliens, quote unquote. And I experienced a lot of issues from my own union, essentially blocking me from taking work that I had, gotten through auditions that I'd done, and I felt like I had, earned these jobs at all these amazing regional theaters, and I booked Broadway shows and things, and at kind of every step of the way, my union would be like, no, it's written into our language that you can't do this because you're a non-resident alien. So after kind of 15 years of dealing with this, and at the thing about the O1B and equity is that the rules are so nebulous that a lot of times actors who are on this visa end up facing the no from the union, but really it's got to do some more work to make sure that you can do it. And so many people just think that the no means a no, and it doesn't. So in any case, that's my long story of saying that 15 years of doing that and kind of fighting my way through those jobs and being able to do all these jobs. And as a non-resident alien on an O1B visa, I eventually got my green card in 2019. It took me 19 years to get my green card. And last year, I became an equity convention delegate because the Equity Union has had their big convention in April, like a couple weeks ago, where we were able to bring to the table all of the changes that we as delegate members saw that were necessary to make in the union. And I brought it forward to change these non-resident alien restrictions in equity, which got changed. And I cannot wait to tell like every single producer in theater on this call about those changes and how they will no longer prevent any theater from working with a non-resident alien, quote unquote, on an equity contract. Yeah, that is my immigration story. I would love to pass it over to Kholoud.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you everyone for sharing your stories. I know what it takes to share whatever we're sharing publicly. I am Kholoud, as I shared previously. I'm originally from Damascus, Syria, born and raised there. And in 2012, I came here for my for my MFA in directing. I was actually in Damascus when I wanted to Google MFA in directing in the United States, and I didn't have good internet, so Arkansas came at the top, so I ended up in Arkansas because I didn't make it down the alphabet. So thus, 8 years later, I'm in Arkansas or 9. Yeah, so I finished my MFA in 2015 and also went through the OPT, optical practical training or optional practical training, I don't know, the 1-year extension of my F1 visa. In the meantime, I was looking at different options. What could be a different option for me? I looked into an asylum since I'm from Syria, but for multiple reasons that didn't work out. One of them was that I didn't come here as on that. There was that, like there was something about like you didn't apply immediately coming here. So there was something there, an advice from a lawyer, one of the lawyers I talked to or attorneys. So then I was looking at different options. At that time, I was applying to a grant from the Doris Duke Foundation, the Building Bridges grant. And that allowed me to apply for the alien with extraordinary abilities as well, the O1B visa. And I got that October 2016, which is right before the shift in the leadership here and the administration and what that brought with the travel ban wise, which of course was I was influenced by that directly. So there was navigating that conversation as well. So I haven't been able to travel outside of the country, but I've been able to stay under the O1B visa. And luckily I was able to work in multiple places around the country, which saved me later, especially as renewing the visa. Thus, I want to highlight what Salma brought up. What do we say yes to? Who do we partner with? Who do we collaborate with? Who takes advantage of us? Because absolutely, that happens a lot. That doesn't stop companies from doing it if you are on a visa. That actually might be more like, oh, great, that's an easier taking advantage of someone like that. Maybe, I don't know, who knows, but it was absolutely the wrong collaboration on the grant conversation with the company. But I'm grateful that there were other companies that took the ball and continued the conversation with so much grace and support. And that was a very hard lesson, but a good lesson.
Thank you, Kholoud.
Can I add just one thing quickly?
Go for it.
I just realized that also in my introduction, I mentioned nothing of my craft as a dramaturg and my passion for it and why I studied it. But also here, this is part of it. This is the reality we live in when we're dealing with paperwork and the immigration process. It's real at a certain point, at least for me, I feel that I have to separate that process with the emotion and passion, because oftentimes they really don't intersect. So not apologizing, but just this is why my introduction was way too dry. And none of it was about my passion for the theater or why I chose to take on that adventure.
I would to that I would respond. I feel like us still being here is a testament to how much we love what we do, because otherwise there's really no reason. And in hearing you guys talk about and in rehashing my own memories of what this journey has been, I feel like, so just so we like dive right in, I feel like there's this thing, I remember saying this to Kholoud when we were on the phone talking about this panel. there's already the legal barriers, right? There's like the immigration system is designed to a degree to keep us out or really filter us through and like make it harder. And we, jump through those barriers because this is what we want to do. And thankfully, we have been fortunate enough to have the resources and the stars align and what we needed in order for that to make it happen. What I didn't expect, and I think that this panel can be productive in shedding light to, is that the legal barriers are not the only barriers. And then there's the sort of like a sad replication of the barriers in the industry itself. And there's a couple of things we talked about when I was talking to each of you that come to mind right now. And the one that I want to start with is assumptions. And I think assumptions may be the one that I've run up against the most in terms of like, oh, here's a barrier, here's a, Jessica said it best when you were saying like, I am the kind of person who doesn't take the no and keeps digging. I am similarly that kind of person. It does scare me how much I've have to do that and to imagine that there's people that haven't. So like even to like get to the like barest assumption that I still find to be very common. All of us are here in non-immigrant visa, well, except Jessica is now a resident, but the rest of us, congratulations, are still here in what is called a non-immigrant visa, meaning we are not permanent residents of the United States. And there is an assumption from many companies that people who are here in non-immigrant visas cannot get work. I've had many times faced the citizens and permanent residents only to awards, to fellowships, to festivals. And it is always on me. Like I'm like, okay, let's figure this out. I email someone and I'm like, can you explain this restriction to me? Like what's behind this? And I will usually get some sort of answer of like, well, we can't pay you otherwise. And I'm like, no, that is completely incorrect. You are like, I am here on my visa that very much allows me to work and get paid. And I think there's this assumption that it can. I remember specifically a company that put together resource for artists during the pandemic. And one of the things that it said is if you're not here, if you're not an American citizen or you have a green card, you won't receive the stimulus check. And I was like, that is wrong. Like you should not say that. And I emailed them and they were like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I, a lot of grace and forgiveness, but there's a part of me that's like, when you feel confident enough to put that in your website, in your rules of like who can apply and what, you're choosing to express that without the curiosity to make sure that what you're saying is true. And the burden is on us to have that curiosity. And as Jessica said, there's people who are not going to dig. There's people who are going to say like, well, I can apply. I guess I can't apply. So I wanted to start with assumptions and sort of hear from you guys also, like what are other ways where it's not just the legal thing. It's also like, oh, I'm running up on these barriers that are not necessarily built into my visa.
Well, a quick assumption that happened with me and was like not similar to yours, Francisco. I mean, this I had gone through a lot, and also whenever I had read this grant is only available for U.S. citizens or whatever, I took the no. I was like, all right, fine. I'm not even gonna like go through that hurdle because I already have to go through so many other hurdles. But the assumption that I heard once was, it was about by a hiring person at an institution that I worked at for a good amount of time, and when things started getting hard in regards to visa, halfway through the conversation, they were like, well, we just assumed you could renew your visa. Well, you're here anyway, right? And I was like, whoa, like, it's like, I don't need, just because I made it in, or just because I'm working for this year, or just because I made it through the border and now I'm working and getting paid, that's it, that the work is done. And there was like, I think there was a moment like, we don't understand why this is like so high stakes. And I was like, because I have to leave. Like they're like, that's it. Like if this doesn't get resolved within the next 2 months, I'm out. Like, so this was an assumption that was definitely hurtful, amongst all the other things, of course, that when you apply for a job that you can take the job verbatim as is, as opposed to negotiate either title or job descriptions, or a lot of things that just have to do with the paperwork. And I feel a lot of my time, I feel that I have to educate, but also learn in the process. because I had learned from my lawyer. So I do have a question if often institutions that really want to have immigrant artists and really support them to have an immigration lawyer on staff to sort of like be a mediator and all of that. And I have a good experience about that I would share later, or now, I don't know. I don't know if this is the right time for it or not, but
Go for it.
I was considered for a position, an assistant position, so not an extraordinary position, but it was the only position that I could apply for at the time. And the person that was going to hire me, because she was an immigrant herself, she made the work. She called her immigration lawyer, and she made it a point to me, like, I would like to have you here, but if you take that job based on what my lawyer said, this will hurt you in the future. Like, she did the work and her institution did the work on my behalf. And I feel in the hiring processes, this sometimes, I mean, to those who can afford it, of course, and I'm talking about like big organizations that should have the resources for that, as in like not to just have just a lawyer, but an immigration lawyer on payroll or on stipend or whatever, so that they are accessible. There's a relationship with them. They know the institution. They're not just like a one-time call, one-time consultation, so that it would also be not harmful to the person that's applying for the job. So, but yeah, so my assumption was we just assumed you could renew your visa and stay. I was like, okay, great, thank you. I don't know.
And to open up beyond assumptions, sorry, Jessica, I'm just going to pass it to you. But I think you also brought an important point, if that resonates with either of you, that added vulnerability in those moments. You are the person who has an issue. You are the person who's less than the other candidates. That comes up a lot.
We are making accommodations for you by, doing whatever, which is often like simple steps that shouldn't be counted as like, I'm not asking for a room or like on the beach as your housemate, like this is not a what, like, come on, don't count, like don't count that as part of like, here's what we did for you, because that is not okay. And to answer the point about assumptions, I think something that I have experienced often is the mix between non-immigrant visa, being an immigrant, and in my case, being a refugee. I'm often called, assumed to be a refugee, and I'm beyond honored to be a refugee. I'm a daughter of refugees. We're not actually in the US, they are in Canada, but it's just legally incorrect to label me as a refugee. So, it's just because I still actually carry my home country's passport, and legally I cannot be named a refugee. So I have often encountered that, and I'm often like, oh, it comes casually in a conversation that I'm like, how do I correct that? Or, or someone writes it about me in the website, and I'm like, I would be honored to be a refugee, it's just I'm not. So that is something. And then what is the difference between an immigrant visa versus non-immigrant visa? We are on the O1B is a non-immigrant visa, although like, I don't know, Jessica, if now you are considered immigrant or not, I don't know. And we continue to learn, but that was one of the things I wanted to make sure is brought up as the assumption conversation.
Yeah, I mean, everything that everyone has said has been the experiences, I think, of, of so many international artists and artists who work internationally. I would say that the biggest misconception or assumption that I've seen in my time working on kind of both sides of it, because I also have done some producing work as well and worked as an associate artistic director for a little while, that most people have no idea what immigration entails. They have like just and that has a lot like that is institutionally as well as on the individual. It is complicated, but it's not unnavigatable. So the thing that I think is the most dangerous in our for for international artists and immigrant artists and people on non-immigrant visas is this misconception that everybody falls into the same bucket, that everybody experiences the exact same thing. You're on the exact same visa. This is your path, and it's the exact same as everyone else's, and it's not. And once I think that especially institutions can see that every international person is different than the next, just like every American is different than the next. Like, if we're just going to talk about Americans, every American has different needs, on identity or disability or anything that makes a person is the same for any international artist. And so the misconception that every visa is built the same or every immigration path is the same is really dangerous. And I think that the only way around that, I think similar is what Francisco had mentioned, is to have the curiosity around it and to be open and being able to be like, you know what, I want to work with you. How do we make it happen? Because you can make it happen. There is no giant wall that prevents anybody from working with anybody. It's just you have to navigate through it. And yes, it's work on both sides. But it's the same work that you would do with any other person, American or not. So I just wanted to be able to say that out loud. And just also to echo the fact that like non-immigrant visas does not mean that you're not living here. Because that is something that I've experienced a lot, especially through the O1B. It's a non-immigrant visa, quote unquote, but we are living here. You live like, for the most part, anybody on O1B lives here all year round, possibly 3 years straight, and that doesn't mean that this person on O1B is just like waltzing into America whenever they have a job and then just going home and taking their money and all the jobs back with them. That's not how it works. So I think, please be curious. If you want to work with an artist based upon their artistry, there's a way to do it.
I think that what you're saying absolutely. And to speak to sort of like wrap up on the assumption side, I remember at the Playtron we had this like compassion training for caregivers, because we were doing a project where we were supporting parents and caregivers. And I remember the facilitator of the training said, like, when my baby's crying and everyone in the room looks at me because they want my baby to shut up, not only do I have a crying baby, I also have to take care of everyone else. So I'm taking care of the baby and of everyone else, like assuring them that it will be fine. I don't mean to compare situations to parenthood, it's completely different, but it did that. I remember that struck with me. I was like, yes, I am carrying all this shit. And then not only do I have to take care of that, I also have to make it easier for you, or to sort of like be like, don't worry, we will sort it out, and I will give you this information. And like experiences like the one that Salma just mentioned, like it felt so good to work under an immigrant who understood it and who was like, and here's what we should do, and here's what we're going to help. And I feel like even having that curiosity, even with institutions where there were no immigrants, and I've come across a couple of theaters that are like, hey, like I heard that you're like, do you need any help? Like, people like jump in to help. Like, I feel like having that curiosity and having that proactive of being like, as Jessica said, like everyone has problems. We have this one, and everyone has like different ones. To sort of do something to alleviate that, so like I can take care of the crying baby and not you, because you're fine, so you could like help me. That feels like ultimately, the dream. That's what I would encourage everyone to do, to have that curiosity, to have that proactiveness. As a topic before we move on to questions, I also. We were talking about assumptions, and I do feel like immigration is not always a part of the discussion when it comes to a company's values or to the work that they're going to do. If we think about like all the different Americans, it ends on the like all the different Americans, and there's not a comma, non-Americans. And I did want to like open up the floor also to this phenomena specifically, which to me, I'm always like to not think of immigrants or to say it's okay to just focus on us. Like, you know, and at the end of the day, it's to completely ignore the space that the United States occupies in the world. Like my country never had the choice to say Argentina first. If we say Argentina first, the economy tanks and we all like die. You know, like there's not. I, as a person, never had the option to say America first. 90% of the movies that I was offered came from Hollywood. The music, the clothes, like we are inundated and invaded by the United States in a way that the comfort of someone here to say America first is not free. It's just, it's costing someone else that you don't see. And then therefore it's easier to say. But I still find it to be like a sort of like, well, if I hire an immigrant, I am doing an extra favor. I'm not like, I'm going out of my way. I'm being like extra nice right now. And even from companies that do have like a grounded value system.
I absolutely agree. Honestly, to me, it even starts by how you're honestly sometimes offered to introduce yourself. When you have a question, for example, and of course I'm speaking for myself, when you have a question sometimes that says like, how do you racially identify? That immediately excludes me because geography speaks for me, race doesn't. And I'm not saying that shouldn't be. I'm just saying, please don't make me forced to say I'm Middle Eastern, because I refuse to use that term. I refuse to use that term that is very colonized term. You know, it's forced to us by a colonizer. So allow me to speak for how I want to speak. Allow me to say my geography speaks for me, because my race does not have my language necessarily. My race does not necessarily have, include my cultural specificities that I care about and represent me. So anyways, that's one of the things that I'm like, can we include geography as part of the conversation we talk about? That's one of the, yeah.
Thank you, Kholoud, for that. Yeah, I actually did this also this morning. I have been often finding myself, at least for the last 2 or 3 years, always checking the other box and writing whatever I want to in there. Like, and I think it keeps on changing because I'm still also trying to figure out what's like the best way to identify myself that is not necessarily Middle Eastern or not necessarily white, according to, but I know the reason behind that. This was actually an Egyptian guy who did this years ago, which is a story for a different time. The reason why certain people from certain parts of the Middle East, including Egypt, are checked off as white. But I think in response to what you're saying, Francisco, about being American or not, I would honestly, based on my experience, and I can't say this is like the general experience, but the number of times that I found myself in like ED&I conversations or ED&I rooms or idea rooms, like all of those like affinity groups that are all for equity, diversity, and inclusion, where you as a person in there are asked to check your privilege, and there are like certain points of privileges that you get to check, whether like cisgender, white, like all of your points of privileges. Citizenship is barely mentioned in any of them. And so there's always the assumption that people are here, immigrants, either illegally, which people fight for, which we should totally do that, or they are citizens. And those who are in between, those who are legal immigrants are never included in that conversation, and hence citizenship is never looked at as a privilege as opposed to a baseline. So yeah, so this is why when I hear the word America first or Americans first, I cringe, because I'm like, well, that means I'm not even part of this. Like, why am I even in this room then? So that's how I feel about that point. I just wish citizenship was just added as a privilege. Just to know it is like it takes off a huge time and energy for you to not be a citizen. So
yeah, just to echo off of all of that, you know, right now, especially with the ED&I work that is happening of the last year, we have these conversations about all of the different types of identity and inclusion and diversity, but and in so many in the language of so many institutions, like we don't discriminate on sexuality, we don't discriminate on race, we don't discriminate on this and that, on gender, and the inside of that is you, like, you know, in the, you know, American law right now, you can't discriminate based on citizenship or immigration status. However, even though organizations say that they're not discriminating on citizenship or immigration status, in a lot of ways they are, through just complete lack of I think the curiosity or the putting up these barriers is a form of discrimination, and we should be really looking at it as such, that we need to tear down these barriers on citizenship and immigration in our organizations. And I want to really just bring up what's happening with equity, just because it's near and dear to my heart. And it's that the language of not allowing non-resident aliens, which is a terrible term and I hate it so much, and no one is an alien, has been in the Constitution and bylaws for, like, I don't know, 70, 80, 90 years. And it stayed there for 70, 80, 90 years because of protectionist attitudes, because of America First, because membership, you know, maybe not all of membership, but at least folks who had the power to change it, were concerned that if they changed it, the membership would be like, well, what if we give this job to that Brit? What if we give this job to this Chinese person? And that is a form of discrimination, and it's a form of discrimination that is, you know, that is illegal. But, you know, our government deems it illegal. So we have to change these things, you know, in our policies as well. And these policies run very deep, and we need to address them because it is a form of oppression.
Thank you so much for echoing this, Jessica. And I would also like to add to this, that at any grounds of discrimination, if you are an American citizen, you have the right to sue if you can. And I've been told this in that exploitative situation that I have been in for like a year and a half. I was constantly told by every basically close person around me, why don't you just sue them? Why don't you just call them out? And I'm like, because I will get, like, at the very end, if this gets terminated today, I have to leave. I'm not saying it's easy in any other discrimination cases. I'm just saying, like, the power dynamic there is not, like, the power to even go through the legal channels as an immigrant artist who still, or as an immigrant person who relies on the job or on that boss or that decision maker for your physical presence here. It's so hard to actually stand up for yourself. It's so hard. So there's also that emotional toll on you, because you're like, I'm letting this happen because I should do something, but I know I can't, or I could try and do it, but within that, I'm jeopardizing years of trying to be here, all the paperwork, all the money that went. It's just, it's like, is it worth it? Is it worth the fight or not? And oftentimes, honestly, it's like, nope, it's not worth the fight.
If I may, because oh, I'm so sorry, Kholoud, please go ahead.
Not yet, Salma. Yeah.
If I may, just that's been something that I've been really dwelling on a lot, is this, these really intense feelings of fear that we have as non-Americans. I think we experience it on every level of visa or non-visa, or even as a green card holder, there are levels of fear that, like, I experienced. I'm like, how lucky am I to be experiencing this fear and not another type of fear? And it really, I think, if anything, what I would love for every institution to know is that every immigrant artist out there, to some degree, lives with this fear of, if I don't XYZ, I'm going to have to leave. I'm going to have to leave behind this life that I'm building, this career that I'm building, these dreams that I'm building. And that fear is something that we have to acknowledge, and we have to, that it's very real. And that fear prevents us in a lot of ways from standing up for ourselves, for standing up in ways that in things that we know are right, or even legally, you know, that are the laws on our side. We still don't stand up for ourselves because there's a fear. So if there's anything that I would love to express to institutions, is to please understand that and have empathy with that, and have the curiosity, and have the courage to stand up for and with your immigrant artists, because we deserve it.
And have the courage to name when you mess up, and to apologize, and to own it, instead of gaslighting after gaslighting after gaslighting after gaslighting. Because guess what? We see through it, and we have the receipts, and we will say the truth. You know, whether now in this conversation, or whether 5 years, or in 2 years, or in 2 months, whenever, we have the receipts. When you offer fake, like quote unquote support that is fake, that you know is fake, and you just want to like check the list or look like you offered support, but you don't actually want to do the support, you don't want to do the work, but you don't want to be talked about that you are abusive or racist, or mishandled money, or take advantage of a artist at a vulnerable situation. We have the receipts. We know. We see through it. Come on, you know, like but just because we're not speaking at this second doesn't mean we're not going to speak, or we don't have enough to say. So.
And just off of that, I do think that you're bringing a very good point, Kholoud, which I think is that the willingness to offer support must come with a commitment. It's far too easy to say, I'm going to support immigrants. And what that actually means is, anyone out there okay? Can I put you on my brochure? It's like, well, if I'm okay already, then you're not really supporting me. Like, you know what, at the end of the day, if I jump through all the hoops and I made it all okay, and I land in your brochure, it doesn't, you did not offer support, man. Like there are people who legitimately are not able to jump through it. So I think that willingness to, be able to publicly say, I want to be a part of this, I want to support immigrants, has to have with a commitment that at the very least you're going to see it through, that you're going to investigate, and of course you're going to hit boundaries. And I understand that I would never encourage a company to go past the boundaries, especially a nonprofit, because they are very beholden to the law in what they're able. Everyone's beholden to the law, but as a nonprofit, you are also, your status may be jeopardized. But a commitment to see, it's not going to be easy. Otherwise, we wouldn't need support. If it was easy, then there would be no need for support. And there's something that Jessica said, which has stayed with me, because I do think of this a lot. The law is the start. The legal framework should just be that. Should be a legal framework. The legal framework allows employers, without risking discrimination, to ask us, not now, but in the future, you will need sponsorship. I have a lot of trouble with that question, because legally it may be okay to ask it, but we would never ask an analogous question. You would never ask someone, are you planning to get pregnant? Do you have a terminal disease? You would never ask other people, how long can they guarantee that they will stay at your job without force majeure taking them out of it? So the legal framework is like the bare minimum, and then you build on it if you really want to get involved in the cause. If it felt like you wanted to say something? Go for it. Go for it.
I guess the only thing I would say is that I just completely blanked on the name of the law. It's the IER Act. There are things within it that you cannot actually, any employer cannot ask for your immigration status until you sign a W-9, until you fill out an I-9 form. when you fill out your paper, your can I be paid paperwork, essentially. So it cannot be like, you cannot ask when you sign a contract, are you a citizen? Are you, what kind of papers do you have? You cannot ask that. It's actually illegal to ask that. And like what happens beyond that once you hire that person or determine maybe that person doesn't have, work authorization or what have you, beyond that is the conversation. But if a person has legal status to work now at this moment when they sign the thing, you can't ask for anything beyond that. And that is something that I think that I don't know a lot of people, like arts institutions, know. I feel like I'm always looking at my, I'm still occasionally an actor, and I, do a self-tape, and they're like, are you a green card holder or a citizen? I'm like, you can't ask that. All this stuff with equity that just got changed, you can't actually ask that. So you can't ask that. What happens beyond in the conversations and in those relationships with that artist that go into the future, once you have hired them and they have signed a contract, are, I think, open. And perhaps that's what you're getting at, Francisco, is kind of that onward conversation. But before you hire someone, you can't ask it. So I hope that that is something, maybe that's a myth that gets dispelled.
I do want to name that we are at 4:13. So if anyone has questions that they want to put in the chat, or if you want to turn on your camera and ask it as we continue the conversation, please do so at this time. In the meantime, as folks gather their thoughts to ask questions, anyone, oh, no, it was just Josh. I thought it was like someone asking a question. Why don't we also go around and then name a couple of initiatives that people can participate on or that they can model themselves after. I do want to shout out, Josh has put the Padlet in the chat, which I think contains some links that we've all put in there. The one that I want to shout out is the Playwrights Realms International Theatermakers Award, which was an initiative. Again, it is a company that has more than one immigrant in it. So of course it started here. It is an initiative that we partnered with law firm Dyer Harris to cover the costs of applying for a visa, not only the government ones, the normal ones that you would have to pay with the application, but also the legal consultation that goes along with it. For originally was going to be 3, we ended up having such a wonderful pool of candidates that we expanded it to 5. I cannot say more yet, but stay tuned. We had the first round already, and we already selected winners, and whatever shape it takes, we will continue doing this sort of work with immigrants. I see that there's a question in the chat. Can you please talk about visa status, scarcity mentality as an additional barrier? That's an amazing question. I have spoken a lot already. So anyone wanna give a shout out, a response to Isabel?
I will say that the naming of extraordinary ability is, it's a bit of I think it's a misnomer, and it puts an undue burden on the artist. I mean, the actual, like, to be perfectly blunt, what does extraordinary mean as an artist? I know when I first got my extraordinary artist visa, I'm not sure, I thought I was very extraordinary, but I think that the measures of extraordinary are like, who's determining them? Is it that you can work, that you'll get work and you're not going to be destitute and, on the street? I mean, I think that's pretty extraordinary as an artist to be making your living as an artist in this day and age. But the naming of it is just something that, like, and I think that a lot of institutions have glommed onto it, meaning that if I'm going to hire this person, that they must be the absolute best person that ever existed to ever do this job, because that's the name of their visa. And it's at the end of the day, the name of the visa, it's crappy. And the person who, and the way that you get the visa is is entirely subjective to an immigration agent on the other end of your application and portfolio. So that is a kind of a really terrible thing. That's an undue burden on the artist. And also maybe it as an artist who's like, I have to live up to this extraordinary visa thing. I think that's also an incredible barrier you place on yourself. And yes, that's my thoughts on that.
And let me tell you, if Americans had to also be extraordinary to stay in this country, it would be much emptier than it is now. So, I do agree that can resonate with institutions. Another one that we got, whoever wants to take this one, how do we convince leaders of especially of large institutions to also care about this cause? Often sessions like this one are mostly attended by people who are already in the know about this. Anyone have some thoughts to share?
I mean, can I say something about like how I feel about the word like either curiosity or cause? Because I mean, again, depends on the capacity of each organization, each institution. But if an institution claims or says or wants or aspires to be truly inclusive, they shouldn't be curious. This should be their job. This should not be, again, decisions should not be made business versus ED&I decisions. They should be in the core and DNA of day-to-day decisions. So also framing it as like a cause feels like a charitable case, and we're not a charitable case, or at least that's how I would. It's like we're asking institutions to do extra work. I totally understand that, but what I'm trying to say is that extra work is integral if you want to include the demographic that you're including. It's not enough to just tell those stories on stages. You need to have that in your staff. You need to have that in your creative team. You need to support them fully, so they can also have the creative bandwidth to actually give you the extraordinary ability that they're supposed to have. Every single time I have to go through the visa process, I promise you my creative input is like not existent, because I'm just doing clerical work all the time, printing documents, signing stuff, coordinating between, even thankfully I can afford a lawyer, others don't, or actually my parents afford that lawyer, not me. But so, and having to be the mediator of that is a lot of work to do. Every single time you have to cross the border and to get your first visa stamp, and you have to go through that entire process all over again, or decide not to go anywhere and be stuck here for 3 years, even though you're fighting for a multi-entry visa. It's a lot of work on us. If institutions want to work with us, they need to know that this is part of the work, not, oh, we're going to do this extra thing on the side to be, inclusive. So I know that doesn't answer the question properly. Let me read it again. So not a lot of people show up to those immigrant related because they don't think it concerns them. They think maybe again, I'm assuming, but I'm doing assumptions right now, but that those sessions will all be about paperwork and visa and lawyer stuff. Well, that's not always the case. Sometimes we are talking about as today we are, the emotional baggage of this, how things could be easier from gatekeepers, so we would do our best. Like, why would you hire me if I'm going to give you 30% of my energy, because 70% of my energy is being gone to me just fighting to be here. So I think just to switch, like, the language needs to be different. I think maybe this is us in the sense we need to control the narrative, in the sense of like not to present it as oh, do this little, be apologetic about it. I do that all the time. I'm not even saying I don't do it, but maybe not to be apologetic. If you want to hire me because you think I'm good, this is what comes with me. If you don't think you can support this, I don't think I can work here, because it's not going to work out. I'm not going to give you my best. Like, I just won't, if I have to deal with all of that on my own.
And to complement that, I do feel like this idea of it being a charity, it comes back to the mentality of like, it's okay if I don't do it. I'm still a good person. And listen, you and your God can work that out, but I will say there is no work about confronting privilege when you don't accept the fact that having an American citizen is a privilege. And I think it's easier to slip into that because you just don't see it. You don't see anything else. America consumes itself very much, produces its own culture and produces its own content, so much so. And again, that was never an option for me. I was aware of America. Like I was aware of intricacies that as someone who was born thousands of miles away, I shouldn't know what Seattle is. Like, what the fuck? Like, why do I know shit like that? That's not, that's like deep knowledge. If I quizzed Americans on specific cities of my country, they would fail horribly because that's just not how it works. So there is that acceptance of like, having an American citizen is a privilege. If I am going to confront privilege around in my institution, that cannot not be a part of it.
May I? Oh, I'm so sorry. Please, I've spoken over you like twice. Please.
I want to lift up what Salma said in terms of how much time working on a visa takes, and how much that becomes like you suddenly feel like you have a part-time job or a full-time job often. For weeks, if not for months. Like recently, I was following up with like, a request for evidence for something else. Exactly. And I finished and I'm like, I feel like I have opened a show. I'm like, where is the show? I didn't open a show. I paid money and I didn't accomplish anything, and also lift up what Jessica said in terms of the stress that comes with it, because you often were like, when your visa is running out of time and you don't have your renewal yet, and you don't have the enough support, whether that's institutionally, whether that's enough contracts, whether that's enough evidence you want to show, and you are the level of stress of what that could mean, like the level of nightmares, and I'm actually saying nightmares that you wake up with, like, am I deported? What does that mean? Should I pack? The nightmares you wake up with, like that I'm not packed yet and they're deporting me and I forgot my stuff, and you're like, why am I stressed? Like, to the point that you get to like, okay, so what if it happens? Because you want to calm yourself down. Also,
what if I'm
yeah.
Sorry. No, but I was just gonna add, like, but it doesn't end when you get your visa. I mean, you're already working on, like, the moment you get your visa, you're like, all right, so from this moment on, every single job I have, I need to like collect the evidence and have it there and make sure that the program is done right, so I can keep, like, it's constant. It's constant work. Like, it's a big part of your brain. It just doesn't stop. And at the same time, a lot of it is tedious. Like, honestly speaking, a lot of it is just, it's semantics, and you have to you feel that you're dragging everyone into it. Sorry.
Yep. No, last thing I want to say is, like, your Google search is great, but it's not like what I bring you from my lawyer. So please trust, if I say my lawyer said this, or I connect you with my lawyer, please believe them more than your Google search. Please believe them. Please don't say, here is what we experienced in 2009, or whatever, when we did this in Chicago Shakespeare, or here is what we did in this when we did this. There is a lawyer speaking to you right now, right here. Come on.
Sorry, before you go, Jessica, I want to name it is for 25 or 5 minutes too. We all have profiles on the festival, so if there are questions that you didn't get to ask and you want to message us, please feel free to do so. And why don't we go around? Let's start with Jessica. And besides, final message, whatever you want to give a shout out to, if people can see your work, if people, an initiative that you want people to check out. Right?
Yeah. The thing that I just want to stress is, so I've talked a lot about equity, actors' equity, and these contracts and everything. If you want to work with an immigrant artist, you can. There are no more barriers to working with international artists or immigrant artists through the union. So the best thing that you can do for our immigrant artist, international artist community, is to hire us, because that is how we stay here. That is how we continue to renew our visas. Hire us, because that right now our culture of unfortunately our culture of immigration is almost exclusively split between the power being with the with employers, and the power, and then also family law. So you as employers, hire an immigrant artist, hire an international artist, because that is how you help this community. And there are no more barriers with equity. Please hire us.
Amazing. Thank you, Jessica.
Okay. Yes,
Oh.
absolutely. So let's go. Yeah, go ahead, Salma. Let's
touch something quickly. So in light of like great things that happened, at least for me as an immigrant artist last year, Rattlestick Playwrights Theater Company with New York Theater Salon started a global festival initiative last year. It was all virtual. It was really successful. Now we're redoing it all over again. We're doing it from June 1st till June 9th. The website and the link is in the Padlet. I would also want to say that if you want to meet immigrant artists and work with them, the festival has so many things happening, but there's also a section called Global Meets where you literally can go and like virtually network and like have speed dating with certain immigrant artists if you want to hire them. So that's a great room for collaboration. I also want to lift up what Sea Lighting Foundation has been doing for the last year to support designers and dramaturgs who were often for a long time not included in the conversation about being an immigrant, because our careers and lines of work were not considered. I don't know, they were just not part of the discourse, but now they are because of Sea Lighting. Thank you for that. So yeah, I just want to I want to shout out what Rattlestick is doing, New York Theater Salon, what Playwrights Realm is doing is amazing. There's also an immigrant series, a series of immigrant artist conversations that I host with my friend Jody Du with Rattlestick every month called Global Gab. We constantly bring in issues that deal with immigrant artists and immigrants in this country. We are currently on hiatus. We will be at the festival, but we are going to come back separately in September again. All of that is in the Padlet, but just wanted to invite y'all to come and join all of these amazing things. They're all free as well.
Thank you, Salma. Kholoud, any shout outs that you want to?
I think Selma and Jessica covered all the specific names that I wanted to highlight. I just briefly wanted to say thank you for all the theaters that when you ask them for a letter of support, they say, yes, absolutely, no problem. When you say I need to be paid through an I-99 as opposed to a they say, no problem, we'll make that work, without any sort of thank you for all of this, yes, and instead of like, oh. So thank you for that.
Jessica, any shout outs?
No, I mean, just equity, please. You don't have to watch anything that I write or direct. Just hire an immigrant.
Well, yes, hire us as well, and everyone.
Yeah, hire and pay them, not just hire them for credentials, please. Like they need to also be paid and not just to be hired for credentials. We will fight for the credential. We want you to fight for us to get paid.
Absolutely, yeah.
Pay artists in general. Artists in general, pay them.
Yes.
I do encourage everyone to check out the Padlet and for the panelists themselves to add to the Padlet even after this with other resources. And I think that's our time. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Josh. Any closing comments from Josh?
Yeah, thank you so much, Francisco. I just want to say thanks, everyone. And as we mentioned, you can be in touch with the panelists via the Mighty Networks, just individual message folks, or you can go to the event page and post comments on there. I've dropped a link to a feedback form in the chat, so we encourage you to tell us what you thought of the session. Your feedback helps us program our events, so please take a moment to fill this out if you can. And thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon.